He might be the best player in the country, but Jaxson Dart is too reliant on Tre Harris right now.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're talking about the unexpected issue that is developing for Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels. It seems Jaxson Dart and the offense are becoming too reliant on wide receiver Tre Harris. Right now, Dart and Harris are the clear statistical leaders, but it's coming at the expense of the other weapons Ole Miss brought in this season. That lack of distribution has suffocated the offense against Kentucky, and it's something Kiffin needs to address moving forward. Also, don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC and even Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy provide other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. So check it out. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, it's very weird to think about right now, but Tre Harris is possibly the best football player in all of college football. If you look at his numbers, he has over 800 yards receiving 5 games into the season. He is averaging about 10 catches per game. He's up somewhere in the neighborhood of about 49 for this season. It's at the point where he's going to shatter every record that Ole Miss has if this keeps up. But I think this might be coming at the expense of the Ole Miss offense as a whole. And what I mean by that is Ole Miss brought in a ton of weapons in the offseason to prevent Tre Harris from getting double teams, and none of those weapons are getting the football right now. Now, if you look at what we learned in this Kentucky game, he's looking too much at Tre Harris at the moment. And also, why sign all of these running backs if you're not going to use them? I mean, Henry Parrish being injured at the end of the Kentucky game, where was Ulysses Bentley? Where was Rashad Amos? Where was Dominique Thomas even? Where was Matt Jones? I just think that we're getting a little bit too overly reliant on a rotation, and the game was lost on the offensive side of the ball, not the defensive side of the ball. So that 4th and 7 aside where they completed the long pass to Barry and Brown, 17 points should never be scored just by this offense. This offense is way better than the numbers they put up on Saturday, and a lot of that goes back to that first point. The offense is locking in too much on Tre Harris. For instance, look at the game. At the game, Jaxson Dart was 18 of 27, 261 yards and a touchdown. Heck, for most of my life as an Ole Miss fan, this would be a really good quarterbacking day. You saw these numbers to be great, but Jaxson Dart struggled. It was his worst game of the season, and part of that comes down to him locking in on Tre Harris. Tre Harris had 11 catches for 176 yards. That is right. Over 2/3 of the receiving yard or the yardage in this game passing was to Tre Harris. Nobody else really got involved at all. For example, when you look at the other players on the roster, Caden Priestcorn caught that 42-yard Hail Mary on 4th and 7-ish at the end of the game. That was his one contribution to the game. Caden Lee had 2 catches for 19 yards in this game. That's it. Caden Lee, that slot receiver, does a little bit of work whenever this offense is clicking. And this is the part that's going to infuriate everybody. Jordan Watkins, 0 catches, 0 yards, 0 touchdowns. You saw him on punt returns after Micah Davis got knocked out of the game, but that was essentially it. He basically was on Ulysses Bentley, the 4th duty in this football game. And then Juice Wells, 0 catches, 0 yards, 0 TDs. He did have 1 drop, and it was a bad drop. I will give credit, but he had 1 drop, and the ball never saw him again. So when you look at the outside weapons, it is becoming very much overly reliant on Tre Harris. So like I said, Tre Harris is on pace for about 110 catches and 1,900 yards this season. But if you look at the other receivers, you have Caden Lee is second on the team with 16 catches, 275 yards and a touchdown. Third is Juice Wells at 14 catches, 274 yards and 4 touchdowns. Third is Caden Prescorn with 10 catches. After that is the running backs, Henry Parrish. Then you have Jordan Watkins with just 5 catches on the season. This is in comparison to Tre Harris, who has 49 catches on the season. Everybody knows there's 5 games worth of film now. Everybody knows what Ole Miss wants to do. Ole Miss needs to either have some variability in their offense, which I talked about last week as what would be an advantage in this game. The fact that it didn't happen it just blew my mind. But Ole Miss has to put some variability in this offense, especially in the wide receiver game, getting Juice Wells involved, getting Caden Prescorn involved, getting Jordan Watkins involved, using the quick game. You can't just duck and chuck it 30 yards downfield every single time and expect to be successful against good defenses. Listen, this game was the Alabama game from a year ago, and everybody's going to talk about where Alabama ended up. That was not the Alabama that Ole Miss played that day. Ole Miss was expected to potentially win that game because if you remember, going into that Alabama game the week before, Alabama struggled mightily with USF and didn't even play Jalen Milroe. Milroe came back in for the Ole Miss game. But the Ole Miss offense could not do anything against that defense. It was very much a duck and chuck philosophy, and this was without Tre Harris. The running game did not work particularly well. Jaxson Dart did not have his best day, and Alabama ended up winning the game. This was that game. Now, the difference is this wasn't Alabama or Georgia. This was Kentucky. Kentucky was good, and they're good on defense, but this was Kentucky, not Alabama or Georgia. But this was that game. Now, everybody needs to remember that after that Alabama game, the whole week, everybody was just completely down on this team, completely just doom scrolling Twitter the whole 9 yards. But the following week was against LSU, and Ole Miss's offense came out and really clicked. Quick game, tight end usage, the whole 9 yards. The whole playbook was opened up, and Ole Miss was able to be honestly dominant against the LSU Tigers. So I'm not necessarily ready to take the data point against the Kentucky Wildcats and just extend that to eternity. I'm the type of person that realizes that each game is a self-contained thing. So if you play bad one week, you can play better the next week. And, there's a natural roller coaster that develops over the course of the season. Some people like to ride the roller coaster. Some people like to sit at the bottom and just wait and point and hope it's always going to be there. Some people only want to sit at the top and just hope and point it that way. Other people, like I said, want to ride the roller coaster a little bit. So I think Ole Miss can come out against South Carolina, and they're going to be better. But the important thing that they need to take away this week in practice, and this week is going to be an unbelievably difficult week of practice if Kiffin has any of his old school coaching roots in him. When you get to South Carolina, there has to be some variability. They have to use Caden Lee. They have to use Jordan Watkins. They have to use Juice Wells to go with Tre Harris. Tre Harris doesn't necessarily need to be the focal point every single play. If the defense knows that, it is easier for them to shut it down because they can definitely put all their attention on what is going on there. The whole point of taking away double teams from Tre Harris disappears whenever the usage of Tre Harris is about 50% of the time. Tre Harris is a very good wide receiver. And like I said in the opener, he might be the best player in all of college football right now. He's on pace for like 110 catches for 1,900 yards. He's over 800 yards 5 games into the season. He's averaging 160 yards per game right now. So he's a good player, and I understand the trap that Jaxson Dart has, but you can't do it. You have to utilize him within the framework of the offense. Now, a lot of what Ole Miss did against Kentucky was RPOs and tags, not necessarily an RPO, but a tag. And in some of those passes, those hitch passes that went out to Tre Harris, it didn't look like it didn't supposed to go there. It wasn't supposed to go there. And like I said, I wonder if Jaxson Dart is just a little bit too reliant on this player that might be the best player in all of college football. He is going to be fine. He is going to be great. He is going to provide value to this offense if you run the whole offense. If the defense has to worry about everybody, they're not going to be as effective against Tre Harris. And he can still get his numbers. He can still get his catches. He can still get all of that stuff. But the offense as a whole is going to move much more smoothly. It's just a weird situation. I just genuinely think right now that Jaxson Dart is too reliant on Tre Harris. And if you look at the stats, that irons out. And whenever you have good coaches with good athletes that they see this, whenever the stat sheet comes out and Tre Harris has 50 catches and the next highest has 15, and they know that that's the person they have to look at 90% of the plays, that's going to make it even a little bit more easy for them than if they had to worry about Juice Wells and Caden Lee and all of these other players as well. In fact, because of that, the run game probably gets stacked to where they stop the run. The front seven concentrates on the run because you can just double team Tre Harris and the rest of the field stays open. Utilize your weapons, Jackson. That's all I'm saying there. Utilize your weapons. Ole Miss and the Grove Collective paid millions of dollars to bring these weapons in. Utilize these weapons. That is my point there. So we'll see exactly how that goes against the Gamecocks. Why did Ole Miss invest big in top-tier running backs only to leave them on the sidelines? We break down the surprising strategy and what it means to the Rebels moving forward. Do not miss it. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. The South Carolina Gamecocks Ole Miss line opened up at 10.5 points and the over-under at 51.5 points or something like that. So you can go to FanDuel and wager that. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, like if Ole Miss is overutilizing Tre Harris, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. I want to welcome a new partner to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast in College Corner. It is your one-stop shop for all things Ole Miss. Game day is just around the corner for the South Carolina Gamecocks, and the color is powder. I think they're doing a garnet out in that game, so that powder's really going to stand out. But if you have a game time emergency before you head over to Columbia, hit College Corner up in Oxford and Sisk Avenue and Flowood or in Ridgeland. Also, Scott just got a bunch of Realtree Galaxy tumblers, and they have more stuff on the way. Whether you're into football, basketball, or baseball, College Corner has got you covered. They're located on Sisk Avenue, right across from the new Chick-fil-A, and getting to the store is a breeze with a ton of parking. They also have branches or locations in Ridgeland and Flowood as well. And for those of you out of state, no worries. Visit collegecornerstore.com where they turn around orders lightning fast. Trust me, this just isn't a pitch. This is where I get all of my Rebel gear. College Corner is amazing. So visit collegecornerstore.com or stop by the College Corner today. So Henry Parrish ran the ball 13 times. Ole Miss ran the ball by running backs a total of 16 times in the game. It's about 2/3 pass to run. If you look at 27 attempts by Jaxson Dart, and they ran the ball 16 times with running backs, and you also have scrambles and things like that with Jaxson Dart. But that's the kind of the split that happened in this football game. But Henry Parrish got kind of banged up late in the game. Now, I don't know if he's going to be all right. We'll wait until the injury report on Wednesday to find out what's happening. But when you have a running back that is a little bit nicked up, and I understand Matt Jones, all of that, but where's Ulysses Bentley IV? Where's Rashad Amos? Where's Dominic Thomas? Where are these players that we invested so much money into in the offseason? Where are those guys in a situation when you need that depth? Listen, we all talked during the offseason about how Lane Kiffin was accumulating depth to prepare for a 16-game season and a chance to win the national title and all of that stuff. Well, we're at the point now, after this Kentucky debacle over the weekend, that you need to empty the clip. Everybody that needs to play needs to play. It's not about conserving reps. It's not about load management. It's not about any of that. It's about having the best players on the field at all times. And whether that's Rashad Amos or Ulysses Bentley, whatever's going on, they need to be on the field. And I saw Ulysses Bentley returning kickoffs against Kentucky. I saw, that happening. Why are you going in and putting a running back that is obviously limping and needs to at least take a breather? I'm not saying he's going to miss an extended period of time, but he at least needs to take a breather. Give him the rest that he needs and put somebody in there to take some of that workload instead of just dropping back and duck and chuck and all of that stuff. Ole Miss being too reliant on Tre Harris and having a weird running back rotation at the moment, it baffles me. The Tre Harris thing I didn't see in the beginning of the season. I knew he was going to be great. I knew Jaxson was going to be great. I did not know that Jaxson was going to fall into the trap 5 games into the season to where Tre is 50% of the offense. I mean, that in any world, that is a problem. Tre cannot be that level of the offense. You become too predictable, too easy to stop when that happens. So you need a running game. And Henry Parrish should have been there to do that. But he got a little bit nicked up. Ole Miss didn't stick with it. And the running backs that have experience, like Rashad Amos was a 1,000-yard runner a year ago. Ulysses Bentley, one of the top running backs in the Southeastern Conference. Where are they? We are halfway through the regular season. It is time to empty the clip. Make sure the best players are on the field at all times. It's not the players you like, not the players you want, something like that. The best players need to be playing at all times at this point, because Ole Miss legitimately needs to win on the road at South Carolina, which is going to be difficult as a 10.5-point road favorite. Win in Baton Rouge, which is going to be difficult, which Ole Miss is going to be a road favorite likely in that game. Beat Oklahoma, who just went to Jordan-Hare and pulled off a win. And then you have Georgia. You need to get to that Georgia game, or then you have Arkansas, then you have Georgia. But you need to get to that Georgia game with just the one loss. This Kentucky loss made it so difficult for Ole Miss to achieve its goals, because all of a sudden the daunting games that are in front of them look more daunting. And the confidence that you had going into it, it is shook. So Ole Miss needs to figure out a way to get this victory against South Carolina. South Carolina is a very good team. Defensively, they're fantastic. They have some problems offensively. Honestly, it's a little similar to what we saw just Saturday. But Ole Miss needs to go into Williams-Brice and figure out a way to pull out a victory. In this game, and Saturday against the Kentucky Wildcats, it wasn't on the defense. Granted, the defense gave up that weird 4th and 7 play, but there was a push-off on that play that wasn't called. They called Ole Miss for any touching that they did. Mark Stoops did a fantastic job basically getting all over the officials in the first 5 minutes of the game to where the officiating got very slanted. But he pushed off on that, but he made the catch. Okay, he did. But that was not the defense's fault that the game was there. In the first half, they were handsy. In the second half, they cleaned that up. They should have cleaned that up during the week, but hey, I digress a little bit. This wasn't on the defense. Anytime you give up 20 points and this Ole Miss team gives up 20 points, they should win the game because the offense should be in the 30s at that point. But the offense fell into that trap of being too reliant on Tre Harris. 50% of the offense is just ridiculous. And somebody's going to look at the stats like, wow, Tre Harris is all that Ole Miss has. And then if you watch the game, you saw Ole Miss forcing the ball to Tre every chance they could. And that was at best problematic. And when you have Jaxson Dart, who was just a little bit off in this game, and he was legitimately off in his ball placement, it was problematic at best. When that happens, this offense can get stagnant. You got to lean on the running game. They have to get back to their roots of running the football, and they have to utilize their weapons. If they do that, they're going to be fine. You heard them talk all the offseason saying, hey, if you take away one thing, we can do this. If you take away this, we can do this. They had a ton of variability in their offense. Well, right now in this Kentucky game, it was throw to Tre Harris and maybe a quarterback draw. And that first half was just ugly. Second half was a little bit better, but it wasn't great. So we'll see exactly how it goes, but we'll see. Coming up, we break down the Week 6 SEC betting lines and start shifting our focus to the South Carolina Gamecocks. Get ready for insight and analysis you will not want to miss. You know, Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets. You can probably get them a little bit cheaper now. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seats, they have the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. You know, there's not a bad seat in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. But whenever Ole Miss takes on Oklahoma in a Galaxy Realtree helmet game, I can see where that would be sold out. Ole Miss has broke the stadium record, I think, 2 or 3 times this season. And you can see exactly what the seats view is before you buy the ticket. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, basically all the customer service bells and whistles that you want. You know, take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And with this being the most anticipated season in Ole Miss history, I might be able to help you out with tickets as well. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Ole Miss opened up with being a 10.5-point favorite over South Carolina on the road. The over-under is opening up at 51.5. This is a game that I think Ole Miss can get right in. And South Carolina is a good team, and they do a lot of stuff. But we have seen that defensively a team open South Carolina up in the pass game and specifically in the middle of the field. This game has Caden Lee and Jordan Watkins and Caden Priestcorn written all over it. Ole Miss leaning too much on Tre Harris would be at best problematic, but the weapons that they have, they can be utilized, and Ole Miss can move the ball through the air, get that defensive line moving. Dylan Stewart's a really good player. That defensive line is a good player. Ole Miss needs to get right going into this game. If you look at the other games this weekend, Missouri is at Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a 1.5-point favorite over a top 10 team at home. That is at least interesting. I want to see what happens there. Auburn is at Georgia. They get the duty to go into Athens after Georgia lost the game that they lost against Alabama. Auburn is the team that gets to go into Sanford Stadium and deal with all of that. They're going to be dealing with a pissed off Georgia team. Georgia's favored by 23.5 points. That is interesting. We talked about Ole Miss being a 10.5-point favorite at South Carolina. South Carolina is going to be a difficult game for Ole Miss because this is the Juice Wells Bowl. That place is going to be a cauldron. They are mad at Juice. It is odd how much they look at Juice Wells in this situation, and they blame all of this on this Ole Miss South Carolina game, and they're ready to go. It's a Garnet out. Luckily, it is at 2:30 in the afternoon. It is not a night game. That is a good thing because Williams-Brice Stadium is a very difficult place to play, and everybody just about says that. It'll be interesting to see. I like Ole Miss in that. Ole Miss is favored for a reason, but Ole Miss has to come off of Tre Harris and start utilizing their other weapons. In the Kentucky game, they fell for the trap. They ate the cheese, the whole 9 yards, and all of a sudden that offense got stagnant a little bit. Alabama's a 24.5-point favorite at Vanderbilt. We'll see exactly how that goes. Will Kalen DeVore have a letdown game after that Georgia game where they were unbelievably up? That Alabama-Georgia game was one of the best college football games I've ever seen. Alabama was up, got up to like a 30-7 lead, held on for dear life, and got a touchdown at the end on that Ryan Williams. Did you know he was 17 years old? With a long touchdown reception. And Alabama should be the number one team in the country right now, honestly, if we're going to be real about it. But a good win by the Alabama Crimson Tide. I said during the week that I did not know what to do with Alabama being a home underdog. Now I do, because they were very ticked off. Tennessee's 13.5-point favorites at Arkansas. Arkansas kind of is really good. They're really finding a way to stay competitive, but they're also finding a way to lose games at the moment. So we'll see. With Tennessee being as good as they are, that could be problematic for the Hogs. And Central Florida is at Florida. Florida is a 2.5-point favorite. I talked to Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators, and he was like, yeah, just take UCF. Florida is not winning that game. Take UCF. UCF did not look particularly good against Colorado this past weekend. But Florida, I do not know. But it's a game in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in the swamp that they absolutely have to have. So that's something that we at least need to pay attention to, honestly. And this from Lane Kiffin talking about the Saturday game against the Kentucky Wildcats, says it could have gone either way. So I'm not going to sit up here and say that if it goes the other way, then all of a sudden we got it all figured out. I would have said the same thing about third downs or penalties. Either way, I'm not going to overreact in a loss like this. I don't overreact in a tight win or a tight loss. And that is honestly a good frame of mind. I genuinely think that Ole Miss football is going to recover and play well against South Carolina. The worst thing that could have happened to South Carolina was Ole Miss losing that Kentucky game, because they're going to come in with a very, very revved up offensive attack in this game, because they'll have something that they want to prove with. South Carolina is going to copy a lot of stuff that Kentucky did. Ole Miss needs to figure out a way to handle that, and they do not need to be overly reliant on Tre Harris. Tre Harris, best player potentially in the country. I think Ole Miss might be too reliant on him at the moment, and if Ole Miss can get that figured out, they are going to be all right. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there, and your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. And now go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin get you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link for Locked On College Football right down in the description. You don't even need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And also exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. Our texting program sends you notifications on anything relevant without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial. Experience the future of college sports coverage. We're adding new perks as we grow, so do not miss out. The link is down in the description. For all of you watching on YouTube, we are going to send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.